Today I'm going to talk about my favorite mechanism in Brass. Brass is a classic Euro game that I played for the first time this past weekend. I played, I think, a deluxe version of the original edition. I don't have my Kickstarter copy yet, so I haven't played that version. And there are a few mechanisms that really stood out. I'll hit two of them really quick, and then I'll hit my favorite one. I really like the turn order mechanism a lot. And this, honestly, this probably is my favorite mechanism, but I want to focus on something else for that part of the video. But the turn order is really basic. During your turn, whenever you spend money, you put it on a certain place on the board that shows that you are the one that spent that money. And then at the end of the round, you count up who spent the most money, and they go last in turn order on the next round. And there are a lot of rounds in this game, maybe 20-ish rounds. So turn order has a big impact every time you play a round. So I love this choice where you're kind of deciding, okay, do I really want to spend that much money this turn or this round, because that means I'm going to be last in turn order on this next round when I really need to be early in turn order, because you are fighting over certain spaces on the board. Really, really cool, elegant mechanism for determining turn order. Mutual benefits, I often talk about them in this game. Elements of competitive games where there are things that feel cooperative, and there's a lot of that in this game. Like, there are certain things that you can put on the board that require coal, and if you end up using coal owned by another player, that doesn't hurt them. They want you to use their coal because that'll help their tile flip faster. And there are various things like this where you can use other people's canals or rails in ways that don't hurt them, that benefit them, and benefit you. I really, really like that. But I don't even know if I can call it my favorite mechanism, but I'll call it the most unique mechanism of this game, because it is just, it's almost outlandish in what it does. But the game resets halfway through the game. So you play half of the game, and then when you run out of this deck of cards that you use as your action selection mechanism in the game, you remove a bunch of stuff on the board. You remove, I hope I remember this correctly, you remove all the canals, which are like the things that connect the different routes. Canals are no longer relevant in this new age that you've entered. And you remove all buildings numbered one level buildings, which there are inevitably going to be some of those on the board. Players, those are the easiest to build and the first that you tend to build during the game, unless you develop past them. So you go from this board that's really crowded to this board that is suddenly opens up again, right in the middle of the game, and you know it's coming. This isn't a surprise. If your teacher tells you at the beginning of the game, you'll know that all this stuff is going to be wiped away. And so it opens up a lot of stuff for the second half of the game. There's all these spaces available all of a sudden, but it also means you have to redo certain things. If I'm remembering it correctly about the canals, you do have to remove the canals and then place rails. So you go from everything being connected to suddenly being disconnected, and you have to start building them again, which it just makes it interesting. I know that sounds like it could be tedious, but or redundant, but it actually adds to a lot of interesting choices. It makes those routes relevant in the second half of the game. It also impacts the decisions you make in the first half of the game, because you know this is coming. You know, okay, if I build a one-level building in this place, I think they're called industry tiles, then I know it's going to go away. Or I can try to develop past it, or strategically place my one-level buildings in places where I don't really care if they're going to be there in the second half of the game, and then get up to those level 2 buildings and build them in places where you know you want them to be permanent, and where you know you're going to score them at the end of the first half of the game and at the end of the second half of the game. In fact, I might be stating this even slightly incorrectly. You flip tiles in the game once you've established them, and you start scoring points once you do that. You get income and you get points at the end of each half of the game. So you'll score points in the first half if it's already flipped, and the second half. And I think maybe all tiles that aren't flipped at the end of the first half of the game, they get removed regardless of what level they are. Someone can correct me in the comments there if that's wrong. But basically, there's just a lot of planning. You're thinking about, what do I want right now? What do I need right now in the first half of the game? What do I want to hold over into the second half of the game? And this aspect of just the board opening up all of a sudden for the second half of the game. really, really clever. I don't think I've seen that in any other game. I've seen games that kind of have certain phases that have a big impact on one half or the other half of the game, or one part or not one other part, but never where there's this sudden delineation, like this big thing happens, and half the game is wiped away. Really, really cool mechanism. I could see this working in other games too, where something big and thematic happens. I guess in Anachrony it kind of happens, but the calamity happens so late in the game. But in any game where something huge happens right in the middle, something that you know is coming, and it completely changes the game for the second half and gives it a different feel, but still have the two halves connected and interconnected in ways that lead to interesting decisions. If you can think of other games that do this, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. Or if you have a favorite mechanism in Brass that you want to bring up, I'd love to hear about that as well. Thanks.